Ladies and gentlemen, life often feels like a circle. We wake up, we struggle, we succeed, we fall, and again we return to the beginning. Many of us ask ourselves, why do the same challenges appear again and again? Why do I find myself trapped in the same cycle? The truth is, life is not random. Beneath the surface, there is a hidden pattern, and only when we learn to see it can we finally step out of repetition and step into growth. Today, I want to share with you not just inspiration, but a way of seeing, a shift in perspective that allows us to recognize the invisible threads guiding our experiences. Because once you understand the pattern, you no longer fight life, you move with it. Life has a way of presenting us with the same lessons over and over again. And often we fail to notice this repeating cycle. Recognition of these cycles is the first and most important step in breaking free from them. Many people feel stuck in life as though no matter what they do, they find themselves facing the same struggles, meeting the same obstacles, or experiencing the same disappointments. At first glance, it can feel like life is unfair, like it has placed them in a loop they cannot escape. But in reality, these repetitions are not punishment, they are invitations. They are life's way of whispering to us, urging us to look deeper, to see what lies beneath the surface of our actions, thoughts, and choices. Imagine someone who always falls into the same kind of relationship where trust is broken or respect is missing. They might think, why does this always happen to me? Another person may find themselves moving from one job to another, each time facing the same feeling of dissatisfaction, no matter how different the workplace is. Someone else might continually struggle with money, no matter how much they earn, always ending up in the same position of lack or stress. These are not coincidences. These are patterns repeating themselves until they are recognized and understood. The moment we fail to notice them, the cycle continues. The moment we open our eyes to them, transformation begins. Recognition is not about blaming ourselves for where we are. It is about bringing awareness to the invisible thread that runs through our lives. Without recognition, we live unconsciously, acting on habits, beliefs, and emotions that were formed long ago. Often in childhood, these patterns become the lens through which we see the world. When we recognize them, we start to see that the cycle is not life happening to us, it is life mirroring us. The external world is reflecting back the internal world we carry. This realization can be uncomfortable at first because it requires honesty. It requires us to stop pointing fingers outward and start asking, what is life trying to show me about myself? Recognition is powerful because it transforms struggle into a lesson. The same problem that once felt like a burden now becomes a teacher. For example, when someone realizes they are drawn to the same type of toxic relationship, they can ask, what belief am I holding about love or about myself that keeps attracting this experience? That simple recognition opens a door. It may reveal an old wound, a sense of unworthiness, or a fear of being alone. Once recognized, it can be healed. Without that recognition, the same experience would repeat endlessly as if life were knocking on the door, waiting for it to be opened. This is why ancient teachings often emphasize awareness as the beginning of wisdom. If we are blind to the cycle, it controls us. If we recognize it, we can choose differently. Recognition shifts the question from, why is this happening to me? To, what is this teaching me? The same challenge is still there, but our relationship to it changes completely. What once felt like a trap now feels like a pathway, and the cycle that once drained us becomes the very stepping stone that allows us to rise higher. Recognition also requires patience and humility. Patterns are not always obvious at first. Sometimes they are subtle, hidden in the details of our daily choices. We must slow down, observe ourselves, and notice when the same emotions arise, when the same frustrations return, when the same results keep appearing despite our efforts. The more we practice self-observation, the clearer the patterns become. And once they are seen, they can no longer control us in the same way. Life will always bring cycles. That is part of growth. The difference is whether we remain unconscious participants, endlessly repeating, or conscious observers who recognize, learn, and then step beyond. Recognition is not the end of the journey, but it is the doorway. Without it, there is no change. With it, the possibility of freedom opens. Awareness is the first step to freedom because without awareness, we remain prisoners of habits, thoughts, and emotions that we do not even realize are shaping our lives. Most people live day after day on autopilot, repeating the same actions, reacting to situations in the same way, and thinking the same thoughts that they thought yesterday. This unconscious repetition creates a cycle, and as long as we are unaware of it, the cycle remains unbroken. Awareness is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, what was hidden becomes visible, and what once controlled us silently can now be seen for what it truly is. When we begin to cultivate awareness, we notice the subtle forces that drive us. We become observers of ourselves. We see that anger arises not simply because someone else provoked us, but because we carry unresolved emotions within us. We see that fear limits us not because the world is dangerous, but because we hold beliefs that keep us small. We see that stress overwhelms us not because life is against us, but because we respond to challenges with patterns of tension and resistance. In this way, awareness transforms the world from an enemy to a mirror. What we see outside is a reflection of what we carry inside, and this recognition creates space for change. Freedom begins in that space. For example, imagine someone who has always been impatient, who constantly feels rushed and frustrated by delays. Without awareness, they believe the problem is the world, traffic, people being slow, things not happening fast enough. They blame the outside and live in irritation. But the moment awareness enters, they notice the impatience as it rises inside. They see it, feel it, and recognize that it is not caused by the world, but by their own mind. That recognition creates a choice. Do I let impatience control me, or do I choose another response? That is freedom, the ability to choose rather than be driven unconsciously. Awareness is also liberating because it breaks the chain of identification. Normally, when emotions arise, we say, I am angry, I am sad, I am anxious. We merge with the feeling and it becomes our identity in that moment. But awareness allows us to step back and see, there is anger within me, but I am not the anger. There is sadness, but I am not the sadness. This simple shift is profound because it means we are no longer slaves to whatever emotion arises. We can witness it, allow it, and let it pass without being consumed. This detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It allows us to respond with wisdom instead of reaction. Cultivating awareness requires practice. It does not come from merely hearing about it, but from training the mind to observe. This can be done through meditation, through mindful breathing, through pausing before reacting, or simply by checking in with ourselves throughout the day. Each moment of awareness weakens the unconscious cycle and strengthens our ability to choose. At first, the moments may be brief, like flashes of light in the dark, but over time they grow longer and more stable until awareness becomes a natural state. With awareness, even suffering changes its nature. Pain does not vanish instantly, but it is no longer experienced as meaningless. We can see what it is teaching us, what it is pointing to within us. Instead of drowning in it, we rise above it, like a bird that sees the storm below but is not trapped within it. Awareness gives us perspective. and perspective gives us freedom. The beauty of awareness is that it requires nothing external. It is already within us, waiting to be awakened. No matter where we are, no matter what situation we face, the power to become aware is always available. And each time we choose awareness, we take a step out of the cycle and a step into freedom. Shifting perspective reveals hidden patterns, because the way we see the world determines what we notice, how we act, and ultimately what we experience. Often, the patterns in our lives are not invisible. They are simply hidden behind the lens through which we look. If our perspective is narrow, fixed, or conditioned by past experiences, we cannot recognize the repeating designs of life. We continue to walk the same road without realizing it, like a traveler who circles the same mountain, convinced he is moving forward. A change in perspective is like climbing to higher ground. Suddenly, what once seemed confusing or random becomes clear, and the hidden order of life begins to reveal itself. Perspective is powerful because it shapes meaning. Two people can experience the same event, yet one sees it as a curse while the other sees it as an opportunity. The difference lies not in the event itself, but in the perspective through which it is interpreted. If someone loses a job, one perspective may say, "Life is unfair, I am a failure." Another perspective may say, "This is a chance to grow, to discover a new path." The event is the same, but the meaning creates a completely different outcome. One leads to despair and stagnation, the other to resilience and renewal. By shifting perspective, we shift the pattern of our response, and with it, the direction of our life. Life's hidden patterns often remain unnoticed because we view situations too personally. We assume life is against us or that circumstances are purely external. But when we shift perspective, we begin to see connections. We realize that the same type of challenge returns not to punish us, but to teach us. The repeated conflict at work may be reflecting an unresolved issue with authority or communication. The recurring struggles in relationships may be pointing toward deeper beliefs about self-worth or boundaries. From the old perspective, these challenges appear as accidents or bad luck. From a new perspective, they reveal themselves as lessons written into the pattern of life, waiting to be understood. This shift also requires humility. To change perspective means to admit that the way we have been seeing may not be the whole truth. It requires loosening the grip of certainty and allowing another angle to exist. For example, instead of seeing obstacles as blockages, we might view them as redirections. Instead of viewing failures as the end, we might see them as feedback guiding us toward a better path. This does not mean denying the difficulty of experiences, but it means expanding our view beyond the surface to include the hidden wisdom beneath. Perspective is not static, it can be trained. Just as the body grows stronger with exercise, the mind grows more flexible with practice. By consciously asking ourselves different questions, we can shift our perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we might ask, "What is this showing me?" Instead of saying, "This always happens and I cannot change it," we might say, "This has happened before. What pattern is being revealed here?" The questions we ask determine the answers we receive, and over time, they train the mind to see life from higher ground. When we shift perspective, even the past changes. Experiences that once felt meaningless or painful take on a new light. We begin to see how certain challenges shaped our strength, how failures redirected us to better opportunities, how losses deepened our compassion. This retrospective clarity is part of recognizing life's hidden pattern, the realization that everything fits into a greater design, even when it is not immediately clear. Ultimately, shifting perspective is not about forcing positivity. It is about widening our vision so that we can see both the difficulty and the hidden lesson within it. It is about realizing that life is not a series of random events, but a conversation between the outer world and our inner world. When perspective shifts, the conversation becomes intelligible, and the patterns that once bound us now begin to guide us. What was hidden is revealed, and what once felt like a cycle of repetition transforms into a journey of growth. Discipline breaks unconscious repetition because without discipline, we are carried away by emotions and impulses that run automatically. These unconscious forces are what keep us trapped in the same cycles of behavior and thought. Discipline is not about controlling life with rigidity. It is about creating conscious space where choice replaces compulsion. It is the strength to pause before repeating the same old reaction, to hold steady when the mind wants to slip into familiar patterns, and to choose a different response that leads toward growth rather than repetition. Unconscious repetition is comfortable even when it brings suffering. A person who continually falls into unhealthy relationships may find comfort in the familiar, even though it hurts. Someone who avoids challenges may feel safe in the short term, even though it keeps them stagnant. These repetitions feel natural because they are deeply ingrained. Without discipline, the mind will always choose the path of least resistance, the familiar path, even if it leads in circles. Discipline interrupts this momentum. It is like a hand placed firmly on the wheel of a cart that keeps rolling downhill. Without discipline, the cart crashes into the same place again and again. With discipline, the cart can be steered in a new direction. Discipline begins with awareness, but it goes further. Awareness shows us the pattern. Discipline gives us the strength to act differently. Imagine someone who notices that anger always rises in them during disagreements. Awareness tells them, I see this anger, but discipline is the force that prevents the automatic shouting, the same defensive reaction that ruins communication. Discipline allows them to take a breath, to hold the reaction, and to respond in a new way. Without discipline, awareness alone is like a lantern that shows the path, but without the will to walk it. Discipline is the step forward. What makes discipline powerful is its consistency. Transformation does not come from a single moment of willpower. It comes from the steady application of small, conscious acts. When we choose discipline once, the pattern may still return. But when we choose it again and again, the cycle weakens, just as a path through the forest grows faint when it is no longer walked. The unconscious patterns lose their strength when discipline prevents us from feeding them. Over time, the energy once invested in repetition becomes free for growth and new possibilities. Discipline also creates structure for the mind. Without structure, the mind drifts, pulled by desires, fears, and distractions. These mental currents are what keep us stuck in cycles. Discipline provides an anchor. This may take the form of daily practices such as meditation, exercise, journaling, or conscious reflection, habits that strengthen awareness and provide stability. Through discipline, the mind learns that it is not the master, but the servant. Instead of being dragged into manuscripts, it becomes aligned with conscious intention. Another important aspect of discipline is its ability to transform suffering into strength. Often, breaking free from repetition requires facing discomfort. For example, someone used to avoiding difficult conversations must endure the unease of honesty. Someone who always escapes into distraction must endure the silence of stillness. Without discipline, the discomfort will push them back into the cycle. With discipline, they can endure, and in enduring, they break the old chain. Discipline is not about denying feelings, but about holding steady long enough for the old pattern to dissolve and a new one to emerge. True discipline is not harshness. It is not punishing ourselves or forcing life into rigid boxes. It is a form of care, a way of saying, I will not allow myself to remain trapped in unconscious suffering. It is the inner strength that allows us to remain committed to growth even when the pull of old habits is strong. It is gentle but firm, flexible but unwavering. In the end, discipline is the bridge between recognition and transformation. Recognition reveals the cycle, awareness shines a light on it, but discipline is what carries us across to the other side. Without discipline, we fall back into the old ways, no matter how clearly we see them. With discipline, we have the power to change, to step beyond unconscious repetition, and to shape a life that is no longer dictated by the past but consciously created in the present. Growth begins where cycles end, because true transformation is only possible when we step out of the unconscious repetition that has kept us trapped. As long as we continue walking in circles, repeating the same patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior, life remains the same. The scenery may change, the people may change, but the underlying experience does not. It is only when we recognize, become aware, shift perspective, and apply discipline to break the cycle that the path of growth truly opens. Growth is not about adding more layers to the cycle, it is about stepping beyond it into a new way of being. Cycles exist in life for a reason. They are teachers. They repeat until their lesson is learned. Once we recognize the lesson, the cycle no longer needs to continue in the same way. Think of a student in school. If the lesson is not understood, the student repeats the exercise. Once the lesson is mastered, the exercise changes, and the student advances to the next stage. Life works in much the same way. When we remain unaware, the same experiences return. When we learn and break through, the cycle ends and growth takes its place. Growth, however, does not mean perfection. Ending one cycle does not mean the absence of challenges. It means we no longer repeat the same unconscious mistakes. New challenges will come, but they are on a higher level, offering deeper lessons. For example, someone who has broken the cycle of unhealthy relationships will still face difficulties in love, but now those difficulties are opportunities for deeper intimacy, communication, and trust, rather than repetitions of the same destructive patterns. Growth is measured not by the absence of struggle, but by the quality of struggle. Are we facing the same problems again and again, or are we encountering new ones that expand our capacity to live with wisdom? When cycles end, growth feels like expansion. The mind becomes more open, the heart becomes more resilient, and life feels richer. The energy once wasted in repetition becomes available for creation. Imagine someone who has broken the cycle of procrastination. Before, all their energy went into guilt, avoidance, and last-minute stress. Once that cycle ends, that energy can be invested into creativity, productivity, and meaningful contribution. Growth is not about doing more, but about using energy no longer it to unhealthy loops. Another way growth begins where cycles end is through freedom of identity. Cycles often define how we see ourselves. A person who always fails begins to believe, I am a failure. A person who always struggles with money believes, I am poor. A person who always falls into conflict believes, I am difficult. These identities are born from repetition. When the cycle ends, these identities dissolve. Suddenly, we realize we are not defined by the past. We are not limited to the old story. Growth arises when we step into a new sense of self, one that is not chained to repetition but free to explore new possibilities. Breaking cycles also opens the door to authenticity. When trapped in repetition, we act according to unconscious programming, often shaped by fear, trauma, or social conditioning. We are not living as our true selves, we are living as patterns. When the cycle ends, space appears for authenticity, for choices that arise not from habit, but from genuine intention. Growth is living more and more from this authentic place where our actions align with who we really are rather than with who we were taught to be. Ultimately, growth begins where cycles end because life is always inviting us forward. The cycles are not prisons, but reminders that something needs to be seen, understood, and released. Once we accept the lesson, the cycle dissolves and life opens into new territory. This is the rhythm of transformation, recognition, awareness, perspective, discipline, and then freedom. Growth is not a sudden leap, but a natural unfolding that happens the moment the old circle is left behind. It is stepping out of repetition and stepping into evolution. It is the moment we stop reliving yesterday and begin creating tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, life is not a straight line, nor is it a random collection of events. It is a dance of patterns, some that hold us back and some that invite us to grow. We have seen how recognition opens our eyes, how awareness gives us freedom, how shifting perspective reveals the lessons, how discipline breaks the repetition, and how true growth begins when the cycle ends. The cycles in our lives are not curses. They are mirrors showing us what we must learn, and they are doors waiting for us to step through. The choice is always ours. Remain unconscious and walk in circles, or awaken and walk forward. To escape the cycle is not to escape life. It is to embrace it fully, with clarity, with strength, and with authenticity. And when we do, we discover that the hidden pattern was never meant to trap us. It was always guiding us toward the highest version of ourselves.